Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. Our guest today is the Foreign Minister of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
I want to begin with Lebanon. Recently, an interview surfaced in which the information minister is calling the war in Yemen futile. Saudi Arabia has recalled its ambassador to Lebanon. The leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, just reacted and accused Saudi Arabia of, I quote him, deliberately sparking a crisis with Lebanon, and that this is part of Saudi Arabia's battle with Hezbollah. What is your response?
So there is no crisis with Lebanon. There's a crisis in Lebanon. There's a crisis specifically precipitated exactly by Hezbollah, who, through the use of military force, has imposed their will on the Lebanese government and the Lebanese people. This is a very serious and unfortunate state of affairs. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia continues to be concerned about this. We think that the political class needs to step up and take the necessary actions to liberate Lebanon from the domination of Hezbollah, and through Hezbollah, Iran. Hezbollah itself has admitted, Nasrallah himself has admitted in the past that he receives all of his funding from Iran. This is to us extremely concerning. However, we hope that Lebanon can find a path towards a more stable future, and that is very much in the hands of the Lebanese political leadership and the people of Lebanon. And we are very much interested in seeing Lebanon move towards a better future.
Right, but when Nasrallah says your reaction is very, very exaggerated, he has a point?
We have not had any exaggerated reaction. We have simply withdrawn our ambassador. This is based on the fact that we see no useful purpose of engaging with the Lebanese government at this point in time, based on
until this minister resigns.
It's not about this minister. This minister's statements and are just a symptom of the problem. As I said, the problem is that the Lebanese political class has refused so far to take any serious steps to reform, in both political reform, but even economic reform. One of the main concerns that we have with Lebanon is the endemic corruption, and we see this, for instance, in the recent activities with the port explosion. We see that there continue to be efforts to hamper the investigation into what caused this very, very terrible explosion that killed many people and caused much damage. So the endemic political and economic corruption that continues in Lebanon is why we see no use for our ambassador to be present in Lebanon right now.
So there's no question of sending him back in the near future?
We hope that the situation will change in a way that allows us to re-engage in Lebanon positively. As I said, we do hope that Lebanon can find a path towards a better future, and we believe that that path exists.
You mentioned the port. Does Hezbollah have something to fear about an investigation? Is it what you're implying?
I don't know, but the fact that the investigation continues to be hampered, especially when political allies are implicated, gives us an indication. We call for an independent, transparent investigation into this terrible tragedy, and we hope that whoever is responsible will be held accountable.
The war in Yemen. Does the minister have a point in saying it's futile, that it's going nowhere? Because that's an assumption not only by him, but by many observers. Many years, many deaths, starvation, and no end in sight.
So we have always said, we, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and the coalition to support legitimacy, the coalition that supports the legitimate government in Yemen, that we want to find a path towards an end of this conflict. We have recently put forward, as late as March, a proposal for comprehensive ceasefire, and a path towards political settlement. So we are very much committed to ending the conflict. The challenge, of course, is that the Houthi militia, which is, by the way, trained by Hezbollah and supplied by Hezbollah, continues to refuse to engage in any positive way with this ceasefire proposal.
So 6 months after your proposal, there's no response, and it's basically off the table?
The proposal remains on the table.
But it's not being taken
It's not being taken up. The Houthis continue to attack Marib, a city with over 1 million IDPs, plus 1 million civilian citizens. They continue to fire ballistic missiles and drones at the kingdom. So they don't show any sign of wanting to engage in a serious process to end the conflict.
Are Saudi troops withdrawing from Yemen? There were reports that they were going away from a major military base in Buraika. Is this happening?
The coalition, including Saudi Arabia, continues to be committed to supporting the legitimate government of Yemen to protect the civilians of Yemen from the threat that is posed by the Houthis.
But are you withdrawing militarily?
We are not withdrawing. There continues to be strong support for the government of Yemen and for the forces of the legitimacy.
The U.S. envoy to the region came to Riyadh recently and apparently urged you to lift the blockade of Houthi-controlled ports as a goodwill gesture. Are you ready to do that?
There is no blockade. The ports in all the ports in Yemen are open, including Hodeidah, which is controlled by the Houthis. Ships enter it on an almost daily basis. There are issues with fuel ships entering Hodeidah because the Houthis refuse to adhere to the understanding reached in Stockholm, which stipulates that revenues from the taxes from those ships be used for purposes to support the civilian infrastructure of Yemen, and they use those revenues to fund their front lines in attacking Marib. And this is a problem that the government of Yemen has stated quite clearly, that unless the Houthis are going to adhere to their commitments to the Stockholm Accord, that they will insist that fuel deliveries are made through ports controlled by the government of Yemen. And I would point out that there are at least 3 ports that are controlled by the government of Yemen through which fuel shipments do enter the country. And there is sufficient supply of fuel in the Houthi-controlled areas, where in fact the price of fuel in the Houthi-controlled areas is lower than that it is in areas not controlled by the Houthis.
Right. But when I listen to you, there's a deadlock. Militarily, diplomatically, the war is going to continue. I mean, there's no end in sight. There's no hope on the horizon.
We can only continue to pursue the path towards a comprehensive ceasefire and political dialogue. That is what gives us hope, the fact that there are serious proposals on the table to end the conflict. Of course, both sides get a vote, and we hope that the Houthi militia will put the interests of Yemen ahead of the narrow interests of their
That's
movement.
not happening.
So far, hopefully that will change.
This could be one of the topic of discussions, or I assume it is already, between Saudi Arabia and Iran. There have been 4 rounds of talk, I believe. Mm-hmm. There's a willingness apparently by both sides to have more rounds. How is this coming along?
So the talks so far have been exploratory in nature. They have been cordial, but not substantive. We are committed to a substantive discussion with Iran on addressing the concerns that we and other countries in the region have that would allow us to come to a normal relationship with our neighbors in Iran. We think that there are an alignment of interests is possible, but that would require to address the concerns that we all have. So far, we have not reached any substantive conclusions in these talks, but we have made enough progress that will allow us to move forward.
It means another round of talks soon?
We hope so. It has not yet been scheduled, but we're open to it.
Right. In Iraq or elsewhere?
That has not been discussed yet.
Right. Maybe some goodwill gesture. There was discussion of maybe reopening the Iranian consulate in Jeddah, maybe the Saudi consulate in Mashhad. Is this on the table, something that could be at least concrete towards showing that the talks are advancing even slowly?
Certainly, we are willing to consider all issues and proposals if they are serious and if they are tied to substantive progress.
So this could happen?
It could. No determination has been made yet.
What about the nuclear talks on Iran? They're supposed to start at the end, or to restart at the end of this month. We know Saudi Arabia has been very critical of the previous deal. Do you still have doubts about where this is heading.
We have significant doubts. Unfortunately, those doubts have only been reinforced in recent weeks and months, given Iran's acceleration of its nuclear activity, much of which cannot be justified by a peaceful nuclear program. The level of enrichment that we are seeing far exceeds any requirement for a peaceful nuclear program, and that, of course, is extremely concerning. It also shows us why there were deficiencies in the original deal. We hope that these talks will proceed. We hope that they will proceed positively. We hope that Iran will come to an agreement that allows us and its neighbors to have confidence that its nuclear program is only for civilian purposes, because the threat that is posed by a military program is primarily to us in the region. And there is no justification for developing these kinds of capabilities, and this is very dangerous. Most dangerous right now is also the lack of access for the IAEA. There are limitations that have been placed that are not consistent, not just with the JCPOA, but also with Iran's commitments under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And this is, for us, very concerning, because we need transparency into the nuclear program while these talks progress.
Quickly, I want to touch on Sudan. We've seen this standoff between the military and the civilian powers. A few days ago, Saudi Arabia, alongside the United Arab Emirates, the US, the UK, publicly called for the restoration of the civilian government, but it seems the military are not heeding your call. They've just appointed a new transitional council headed by the same general, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. What is your reaction to this?
So the transition in Sudan was always premised on a military-civilian partnership. We continue to see that as absolutely necessary to go forward.
But it's finished now.
I don't know that it's finished. I think the president of the Transitional Council, Burhan, has quite publicly stated that he still believes in the transitional document, still believes in the constitutional document, still wants a civilian government. I don't believe that we are at an impasse. I think we can find a path forward in Sudan.
Right, but should he step aside and give back power to the civilian Prime Minister, Abdullah Hamdok?
There's no discussion, even within the parties in Sudan, of Burhan stepping aside. This is not at all an issue of discussion. I believe that we can see a civilian government formed, and that with that can lead forward. That is something that the Sudanese have to discuss among themselves, and we will help them with our international partners to have that dialogue.
Mr. Foreign Minister, I want to thank you very much for being our guest here on the France 24 interview. Thank you very much for watching it.